Good morning, everyone. It is 9:05, and I would like to call the Board of Psychology meeting to order and ask that Mr. Polk, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga. Cervantes. Fu. Harpsheets. Nystrom. Phillips. Rescate. Rogers. Tate. Roll's complete.
Everyone, for coming this morning. I'm Leah Tate, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here to the Board of Psychology two-day meeting in Los Angeles. I have some brief housekeeping items before we dive right in. You will notice that all the board members have computer screens right in front of them. All of our board materials are on the computer, so we'll be scrolling and staring at them throughout the 2 days. And guaranteed we're not on Facebook. And then also, you will notice that the agenda will be shifting a little bit this morning. We really want to be on time for the petition hearings to start exactly at 9:30, and usually the judge needs 5 to 8 minutes to set up. So I'll be moving some items around. We'll be focused on action items this morning and a few reports. I will provide an opportunity for public comment on the informational items, so that if anyone has a comment or question about something that I am moving past, you will have that opportunity. All materials associated with the informational items and everything on the agenda is in the agenda packet, so you can reference that at any time. Continuing professional development. That credit will be available for the meeting today, and I'm going to give Ms. McCochran a few minutes to share how to properly document your attendance for today. McCochran, please.
Should I just talk?
Raise your hand, I think.
Can you hear me? Oh, you can? Okay. Good morning. Okay, so attending today's board meeting provides you with CPD credit under Category 1, attendance at a California Board of Psychology meeting. For your CPD records, please notate today's date as November 2nd, 2023, and note that we are here for the board meeting. To receive attendance credit, physical presence at the meeting is required. For 2024, board meetings will be held in person, so physical attendance will be required for credit, but committee meetings will be held via WebEx. Thank you. That's all. Back to you, Dr. Tate.
Hear me? Oh, hello. Thank you, Ms. McCochran. Appreciate that. Before we dive into the mindfulness exercise, I would just like to highlight that we do have a special guest today in attendance. We have Dr. Richard Sherman here today. Hello, sir. And he is a previous Board of Psychology president, so we welcome you. We are headed right into Dr. Rogers' mindfulness exercise. Dr. Rogers.
Good morning, everybody. So glad to be with all of you today. I always have to say a thank you to Dr. Kasuga for putting me on the agenda for each meeting to do this mindfulness exercise. I think it's a great way to center our hearts and minds as we get ready to carry on the business for the day. So I'll start by sharing a quote that I've been sort of resting my heart on lately, and I thought it might be a good foundation for us as we get ready to do this work today, in light of all of the difficulties happening worldwide. So this is a quote by Rumi, and it says, "If everything around you seems dark, look again. You may be the light." And I really appreciate this sentiment. In these really turbulent times, it's easy to be pulled in by the latest heartbreaks of the day, to focus on the pain and uncertainty and tragedy that's happening all around us. So what's the remedy to this darkness? To allow ourselves, as Rumi suggests, to be the light. So how can we be the light? We can do this by exuding and embodying heart qualities that offer a gift to those around us. And your light could be anything. It could be the light of patience. It could be the light of tolerance. It could be the light of kindness. It could be the light of generosity. It could be the light of really taking the time to see the full humanity of another person. It could be the light of a warm smile. So, what is it that you choose today to embody, to be the light? What is the light that can radiate from your own heart so that it touches another? So, spend a moment thinking about a word that best describes your aspiration to be the light. It could be any of those that I just listed. It could be something altogether different. Whatever it is you choose, maybe silently offer this phrase to yourself. May my light of, and fill in the blank with whatever you chose, bring healing to others and to the world. And so for the next few moments, I invite you to find a position that is comfortable, centering your heart on the word you chose, the aspiration to be light in the midst of darkness. And we'll sit together for a few moments. And at the end of the meditation, I'll ring a bell 3 times. So feeling your feet on the floor, feeling the support of the earth beneath you. Settling into the body. And connecting to the breath. Bringing our attention to the inhale and the exhale. Noticing that the mind may wander, and if it does, it's not a problem. That's what it's designed to do. And just bringing our attention back to the breath and to the body and to the earth. And remembering our aspiration for this moment. May I be a light in the midst of darkness. May I embody the qualities that allow me to be light. May the kindness of my heart radiate warmth so that it touches another. And may my very being bring peace to the world. Taking a few more gentle breaths. letting the mind, the heart, and the body rest. And centering ourselves as we approach the work for the day. And in a moment, I'll ring a bell 3 times. Thank you for your practice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers. I'd like to open it up for board comment on the President's welcome. I'd like to open it up for public comment on the President's welcome. If you do have a comment, please come forward and have a seat, and the microphone will be turned on for you. Seeing none, we're going to jump to agenda item number 3. This is public comment for items not on the agenda. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. And before I invite speakers to come forward for public comment, I would ask individuals making comments to not discuss the specifics, including names, as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, pending disciplinary action that may come before the board for a decision. This refers to current and pending complaints and possible future complaints. While there may be a desire to engage in further discussion with comments presented during this time, the board may not discuss or take action at this time. Although this may give the impression that we are not being responsive, these procedures are critical to ensure the compliance with the Open Meetings Act and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. In addition, if there is a speaker before you who expresses similar thoughts, please feel free to verbally agree with previous speakers instead of repeating the exact same comment. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. If you do have a comment, please step forward and have a seat, and your microphone will be turned on for you. I see no movement. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 4 is discussion and possible approval of the board meeting minutes from August 18th, 2023.
Technical errors that Vice Rogers caught for us. Move to adopt the minutes as amended with any technical amendments that Vice President Rogers may have for us. Second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. Any other board corrections, comments? Perfect. I'd like to open it up for public comment for the minutes. If you do have a comment, please come forward and please have a seat, and your microphone will be turned on for you. Thank you. Back to the board. Any other board comment on the minutes? Mr. Polk, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga. Boo. Harpsheets. Phillips. Rescate. Rogers. Tate. Motion passes.
We're going to jump to agenda item number 10. This is the licensing and examination report. Ms. Chung, please.
Good morning, board members. Good to see everyone. I'm going to provide some updates about our licensing activities, and we'll start with our brief update. We're excited to share that the online application for the law and ethics exam have launched in mid-August, earlier than our original anticipated timeline in the fall. Applicants can now apply online and make payment for the exam fee through their Breeze accounts. We have received so far 64 requests that were received through Breeze, and staff will continue to oversee this new online functionality and fine-tune it to perfection. As the new registration category for psychological testing technician will sunrise in January 2024, we have been working with the Breeze team and vendor to create new functionality for this registration and to make them be available online. For example, applicants would be able to apply for the registration, add or change or remove their supervisors, change their address of record, and make payment online. And registration information, such as the registration number, status, and expiration date, will also be available for verification on the DCA license search website once it's been issued, which is similar to our other license or registration category that the board oversees. I would like to send a big thank you to Ms. Mai Song, our licensing and Breeze coordinator, for her diligence and dedication in working with the Breeze team to develop these new functionalities. For our licensing populations, as of October 16, we have 22,707 licensed psychologists and 1,834 registered psychological associates. The number of licensed psychologists include 20,385 who are in the current status and 2,322 who are in the inactive status. You may find more details in Attachment A, the licensing population report. This report provides a snapshot of the number of psychologists and psychological associates in each status at the time the report was generated. We did a little bit comparison to the last report made at the August board meeting, and then we have 33 more psychologists and 62 more psychological associates who are in the current status. In Attachment B, you will find the workload reports for both psychologists license and psychological associate registration applications from April this year through September. We see that there's an increase in open applications in August and September, and we speculate that the increase was due to application deficiencies and a temporary decrease in the number of staff available in handling applications. In Attachment C, you'll find the numbers of applications and notifications received for a 12-month period from October 2022 through September 2023. The total number of all applications and notifications has increased, but is comparable to the same 12-month period as reported in 2021-2022. For our average application processing timeframes, the board reviews and processes applications based on a first-come, first-served basis. This includes, but not limited to, all applications, supporting materials, and responses to application deficiencies. These are all reviewed according to the date that they're received. And you'll find a 6-month overview of the average processing timeframes in business days in Attachment E. We do see that their average processing timeframes show an average increase of about 6 business days in reviewing psychologist applications, and an increasing trend for the initial review of psychological associate applications for requested documents. The increase would be due to the typical higher volume of applications received in the later summer months, as well as the temporary decrease in staff to handle applications. In this past August, one of our full-time licensing analysts went on parental leave, luckily who have already returned on October 16, and one of our retired Newtons had parted with the board So the workload in the past 2 months was being absorbed by 3 full-time licensing analysts and 1 half-time retired annuitant. Staff also anticipate a slight increase in processing timeframes due to the addition for about additional 1 to 2 weeks beginning in January. This is because maybe the sunrise of the psychological testing technician category. The board, unfortunately, is unable to seek additional resources immediately due to the budget at this time. So it is recommended to individuals who are interested to apply to the board for registration or eligibility to take an exam to review for completeness for their application prior to submission to avoid further processing delays. And I also like to provide a status update to the short-term and long-term plans that staff came up with to address the application backlogs in 2022. For the short-term solutions, the additional retired annuitant position is vacant since August 2023. And then for the long-term solutions, the review and preparation for paper-like transition has been completed. Statuses on the other items remain the same. And I would like to thank staff for their positive attitudes and continued dedication in assisting applicants to navigate through this registration and licensure process during these challenging times. Lastly, over the last year, the board has heard public comments about passage rates related to the examination for professional practice in psychology, the EPPP, which is owned by ASPPB and administered through Pearson VUE. It is a standardized exam that assists state and provincial boards of psychology throughout the U.S. to evaluate the qualifications of applicants for licensure. Consequently, ASPPB released the results of their study on psychology licensing exam scores by doctoral program. If you have the electronic version of the documents, you will be able to click the link that is in blue to access that report. Board staff also compiled data from different states about their educational and licensure requirements, as well as each state's pass rate for the past 4 years on the EPPP. At the August board meeting, Mr. Fu requested to carry over this item for informational purposes. So you may please find an excerpt of the meeting materials from the 2023 August board meeting describing the report by ASPPB and the multi-state data compiled by board staff in attachment E for more information. And this concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chung, and thank you so much for your leadership of your department during these difficult staffing times. You've definitely pushed through well. Any other board comment for Ms. Chung? Mr. Fu?
At the risk of knocking over my water bottle and causing a large noise.
Crisis.
Ms. Chung, a quick question on the time frames that you mentioned. You mentioned that there's a trend of increasing time. Applicants can find out about how long these application times are available, the review times for these processes online. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We post about approximately every 2 weeks on the OTIS application that we're processing, so then they can keep track of it, where we are on the application review process.
And that's a wonderful tool for planning purposes, so that if you know it's probably going to take 2 or 3 weeks to just work back from the date that you might need something approved. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And for the second question I had about it's actually not a question, it's more a comment because I did raise it in the last go around, is around the ASPPB report. I just wanted to highlight it for people's attention, and Ms. Chung did mention the link as well in the document for it, which is it does break it out by institution. And we've heard public comments over the last year, actually, at least 6 months, with regard to the passage rates and concern about the passage rates for the EPPP. And I found the report particularly helpful in terms of shedding light the passage rates across each institution here in the state and some of the differences across states as well. And so it's, I think, a great foundational document as we continue these conversations. I know the ad hoc committee, the EPPP2 discussion is still ongoing, and I know the licensure committee continues to have robust discussions under the leadership of Dr. Harpsheets, but did want to raise and flag it here for informational purposes.
And again, this is more a comment and more for the benefit of the viewership, I suppose. If you haven't had an opportunity to look at the documents that summarize this, they do break down the numbers of accredited versus non-accredited programs, and accredited programs tend to have a much higher passage rate on non-accredited programs. Accredited programs being APA or CPA approved, CPA being California, not as being the Canadian Psychological Association. They also broke down the difference between programs that offered PhDs versus PsyDs. PhDs tend to pass at a higher rate, and typical university programs tend to pass at a higher rate than professional schools. I will add, I went to a professional school and I got a PsyD, and I passed on the first try. There's some really interesting statistics if you take the time to look at that, because I think it does give us much more of a sense of who does well on the EPPP and who doesn't do well on the EPPP.
Working
Talking
regularly.
to you.
Is it not on?
It's on, but you have to move
Get
it closer.
Bring it close.
Yep.
I would like to add a comment too, in working with Ms. Chung on a regular basis as chair of the licensure committee, that, and this may be also for the benefit of our viewership too, but that processing these applications is not just a rote kind of simple process, but requires a level of thoughtful consideration in each application. And so it's not quite that simple as when we look at the numbers and try to condense it down that way. So thank you for being so thoughtful, because I really see the benefit of it for our applicants.
Thank you.
I'm also going to add that in some instances, people are upset about applications not being processed quickly, but sometimes they haven't checked to make sure that they've submitted all the documents that are necessary to submit the application, which requires asking for additional documents, which creates more delays. So we again urge people that are applying for a licensing or registration to make sure that they're sending in all the documents on the checklist.
Thank you. Any other board comment before we move to public comment? Dr. Kasuga?
Hi, I just wanted to, I have a question, comment type of situation here. So for the ASPPB report, this was for the previous year, right? Correct? So it's like during pandemic times, or? The ASPPB report?
My understanding is that the report is over a certain time period, and I believe it's both pre and post-COVID, depending on how one defines post-COVID. But it does include a time range of information available. And so actually, one of the things that the staff report did break out was the passage rates of programs of of programs pre-pandemic and what we would consider post-pandemic in the staff report as well. So you're able to see the breakdown. There was a drop in passage rates. That's not surprising when we compare the statistics to rates prior to the pandemic. The report also has further details in there which provide methodology and time periods. Dr. Kusuga.
Yeah. So thank you for the clarification. I was just looking at National University, which is JFK University, which is where I went, and it's just interesting that there's only 6 people that took the PPP, I guess, during that whole span of time, and it's saying that 0% pass rate. I was just curious about that number, because it seemed anomalous for only 6 people to have taken the test throughout that.
For additional clarification, I think what you're looking at is actually by year. Okay. So it's not. So the document that the linked report actually breaks out each passage rate on a yearly basis. It's not done, unfortunately, in a time series, which would have been far easier to read. But the report does actually provide year by year of each institution, but it's broken out section by section, unfortunately.
Okay, so I guess I was just like confused the first time I looked at it, but thanks for that clarification.
Dr. Kasuga? Okay, thank you. And thank you to Mr. Fu for always being on top of the numbers all the time. I'd like to open up public comment for this agenda item. If you do have a comment, please come forward and have a seat. And this would be for the licensing and examination report. You have to raise your hand. Yep. And make sure the microphone's close. Slide it forward. Yep.
Hi, it's on, right? It's Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman with the California Psychological Association. I just wanted to first just thank Ms. Chung and the staff for improving the timeframes. I know there's a little slowdown now, but overall it's been a great improvement, and it's really appreciated by CPA and our members who have brought this to your attention previously. And anyway, we really appreciate it, all the efforts. I just had a quick question about the initiation of the testing technician applications, because I think that both the Board of Psychology and CPA are going to start to get some questions about this. Well, we've already started to get a few. And in terms of the application, I know you mentioned it. I appreciate your work on it, and I just wanted to clarify that starting January 1st, there will be application available online, and also whether there's any supporting documents that's going to be required, or are people attesting to having the experience that is required to register as a testing technician?
Thank you for your question, Dr. Winkleman. Yes, regarding the testing technicians, online applications will be available on the 3rd, based on the launch day of the system, of the new functionality. And it will be an online-only application, and then applicants will need to attach a verification about their training that is completed by their either a licensed psychologist or another registered testing technician, which will happen in the future once we have the category summarizing. They will be attaching that form to their application and make payment there. And then the other documentation, such as their official transcript, will be sent in the ways that it's been accepted, like the other application types. And just for information, we're working to have a website page dedicated to this registration category to provide more information, such as some questions that you might have been receiving. Please feel free to share that with us so that we can include that, because we have received a few too that we would like to include on that page, so which might be helpful for whoever's interested. So yeah, but we will be, once that page is ready, we will be disseminating that information through our listserv. So anyone's interested, please subscribe to our Connect listserv, so then you will get that message and get to that page when it's ready for more information.
Oh, perfect. I'm so glad to hear that in addition to launching all the applications smoothly and on the 3rd, that you'll have the web page that is just perfect, and we will make sure to share that and emphasize that for our members. Of course, I'm on your listserv. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman. Any other public comment on this item? Thank you, Dr. Oh, I just upgraded. Thank you, Ms. Chung. Thank you. We're going to jump into agenda item number 7. This is the DCA update, and I know they sent someone down here to do a presentation for us briefly. Hello, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Yvonne Durantes. I am the Assistant Deputy Director over Board and Bureau Relations at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thanks for having me today. I do have a few updates, so please bear with me. If there's anything you guys need me to repeat, I'm happy to repeat it. Anything that you want to discuss further, happy to discuss further as well. So just gonna jump right into it. And so First of all, today, the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez has been appointed as the Chief of Housing and Homelessness in the office of Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, effective today. And so Secretary Castro Ramirez has been an extraordinary leader with DCA. So we are sad to see her go, and we will miss her, but we are also very grateful for her time and her leadership, and we do wish her the best in her new role. Moving on to our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion update, also known as DEI. Training continues to be a great priority of DCA and also for the DEI Steering Committee. And so in October, 138 DCA leaders and 26 board members completed their DEI human-centered approach training provided by the University of Massachusetts consultant, Dr. Bernard Gibson. On November 7th, University of Massachusetts consultant Christopher Veal will also provide a virtual training entitled DEI Dialogue for Leaders to DCA managers, supervisors, and leadership. The training will include example language and tools, discuss psychological safety and how it impacts these conversations, and interactive discussions around challenges leaders are facing. And so DCA does encourage for all executive officers and management to attend. DCA also continues to support DCA boards and bureaus in expanding cultural competent communications and promote the importance of meeting the needs of all California consumers, licensees, and applicants. DCA's Deputy Director of Communications recently met with the Consulate of Mexico in San Francisco to share information, and the result of the meeting, DCA offered a partnership for future in-person and online events to share available consumer resources. The DEI Steering Committee is also pleased to highlight the work of the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians, DCA's Tribal Liaison, and DCA's DEI Steering Committee. Yafana Lamar recently introduced the Executive Officer of the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians to Brita Guerrero, which is the Executive Officer of the Sacramento Native American Health Clinic. The meeting was to discuss the possibility of tribal health clinics serving as locations for vocational nursing students needing to obtain clinical hours required for licensure. Participants also discussed strategies to encourage members of California's tribal communities to consider becoming a healthcare provider. Future discussions to include consortiums of tribal health providers, consortium of Urban Indian Health, and California Rural Indian Health Board are also in the planning stages. The DEI Steering Committee would also like to continue to learn about and showcase the DEI activities of DCA boards and bureaus. So if your board does have anything to share in regard to DEI or anything that you would want to share with the rest of the agency or other boards and bureaus, please send over to Board and Bureau Relations, and we will make sure that the DEI Steering Committee receives it and disseminates it appropriately. And so that is it for DEI training and updates. Moving on to in-person meetings and the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. DCA boards and bureaus may conduct entirely remote public meetings without noticed locations accessible to the public through December 31st of this year. So as long as the public is able to participate in the meeting remotely. However, commencing January 1st of 2024, 4 meeting options will be available pursuant to the new Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act guidelines. And so there are, like I mentioned, 4 meeting options, and number 1 is the traditional single location option. This is a meeting where the majority of members are gathered at one publicly noticed and accessible location. No members are participating remotely, and there is no requirement to allow for remote public participation. Option number 2 is the traditional teleconference option, in which board members are located at different publicly noticed and accessible locations, and they are connected via phone or WebEx. There are no requirement to allow for remote public participation. Option number 3, which is the new teleconference option, is in which a majority of board members are gathered at one publicly noticed and accessible location. The extra board members above a majority can participate remotely from a private, non-public site, and the public must allow for remote public participation. And finally, option number 4, the new advisory body teleconference option. All members of an advisory board can participate remotely from a private, non-public meeting site. The meeting must have at least one publicly noticed and accessible location where at least one board or bureau staff is present and where the public can participate in the meeting. Additionally, the meeting must allow for public remote access. And so we do encourage for you to work closely with your executive officer and your counsel to ensure that you're completely in compliance with the Open Meeting Act. And again, if there are any questions in regard to the logistics of it, I know, there's plenty of options and it can be a little confusing, so please feel free to ask any questions you may have. Moving on to required trainings. So as we approach the final months of the year, we do want to remind you that there are 2 DCA-wide mandatory trainings that if you haven't already completed, they are due by December 31st. And we will be conducting another round of training compliance for board members, so please make sure to look into that. However, I am also happy to look up your training transcript. If you're unsure or don't remember if you already took some of the trainings, I'm happy to pull it up for you and let you know if you have or have not taken it. And so all DCA employees and appointees, including board and advisory council members, will need to complete the sexual harassment prevention training by December 31st. Additionally, board members with a DCA email, so that would be an email that's ending at dca.ca.gov, also need to complete the Information Security Awareness Fundamentals training. And so both of these trainings are available online, and so the training is required every year. Both the sexual harassment and prevention training and the security awareness training can both be accessed through our learning management system. And again, if you don't remember your login, your user, your password, I'm happy to assist with all of that. Moving on to out-of-state travel updates, with the recent signing of SB 447, by Governor Newsom, California's travel restrictions to states that have adopted discriminatory anti-LGBTQ+ laws immediately ended. And so California's restricted states travel list was eliminated and replaced with a new public awareness project that will consult with community leaders to promote California's values of acceptance and inclusion of the LGBTQ+ community across the country. Over the past years, several out-of-state trips requested by boards were not authorized because of the travel was to a state on the restricted travel list. However, now out-of-state travel to all states is permitted. And so if the trip is critical to the function and needs of the board, out-of-state travel requests must follow the established process for review and approval by DCA, agency, and governor's office review. For questions, also, please feel free to reach out to me or your executive officer. Moving on to Our Promise campaign, the State Employees Giving at Work campaign. In partnership with board members, DCA will continue its tradition of generosity and caring for our communities, and this year's Our Promise Giving at Work campaign officially kicked off on October 5th, and it runs through December 31st. And so leading the campaign efforts are DCA's Deputy Director of Communications, Monica Vargas, and myself. And so we are the campaign co-chairs that are leading this initiative this year. And so this annual campaign does give state employees and board members the opportunity to support nonprofits through a one-time donation or payroll deduction. These contributions make a positive impact by providing vital resources to those experiencing poverty, homelessness, food insecurity, and offer support to such causes as veterans, animals, environment, and much more. And so you can start and make a donation as low as $5, which can make an impact. And so if there are any questions or any questions about the nonprofits that you may select from, please feel free to ask me. There are over 4,000 nonprofits that you are able to select from. And if there are any nonprofits of your choice beyond that, I'm happy to discuss with you in regard to donating. Lastly, on November 14th, board members and staff will have another opportunity to come together and give, and DCA will hold its second annual turkey drive with donations benefiting Joey's Food Locker, a community food bank located in Natomas near the DCA headquarters in Sacramento. And so donations of frozen turkeys, hams, and chickens, as well as non-perishable foods, will be accepted at 3 DCA office locations in the Sacramento area on November 14th. And so for more information, please feel free to reach out to your executive officer or myself. And with that, thank you for this opportunity to provide all these updates. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible amount of information about what's happening at DCA. Thanks for the DEI update. I'm always interested in hearing where we're going. Any other board members for comments?
No, I'm not a board member, but I just wanted to. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to thank the department for their efforts on DEI, and Assistant Executive Officer Jonathan Burke and I attended the Dr. Gibson training, and it was a really, really good training. So I just want to thank you for your efforts. I will be joining the training on Monday or Tuesday. And thank you again.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining. And I believe that training will actually be available online at a later time for those that weren't able to join. I believe it was recorded and it'll be distributed in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Any other board comment? I'd like to open this item up for public comment. If you have a public comment, please come forward and raise your hand. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfect. Before we break to set up for the petition hearing, I would like to take this moment to open it up for public comment for any of the informational items on the agenda. I told you we were skipping around, and so this is your opportunity. If you have a question on anything that I moved past today, please come forward and have a seat. Okay, so it looks like we'll probably take a 5 to 10 minute break while we set up for the petition hearing. Thank you so much. I wasn't ready. Thank you for coming back so promptly. Mr. Polk, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga. Fu. Harpsheets. Phillips. Rescate. Rogers. Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you. We have a quorum. I'm going to hand proceedings over to Judge Galley. Welcome.
All right, I call the matter of the petition for reinstatement of Barbara Terry Friedman, PhD. Matter is before the California Board of Psychology. The agency case number is 6002-022-000-816. The OH number is 2023-100-111. Today is November 2, 2023. This matter is proceeding at the Sheraton Gateway Hotel in Los Angeles, California. and it is before the following board members: Dr. Leah Tate, President of the Board; Dr. Shakunda Rogers, Vice President of the Board; Dr. Cheryl Kasuga; Dr. Maricela Cervantes, oh, I'm sorry, not Dr. Cervantes, Dr. Mary Herb Sheets, Mr. Seiran Fu, Dr. Stephen Phillips, and Ms. Anna Riscata, my apologies. My name is Dina Galley. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to hear this matter. I'm sorry, I'm not assigned to hear this matter. I'm assigned to sit with the board in this matter. May I have the appearance of counsel for the board, please? Complainant.
Deputy Attorney General Christine Fryer Walton, appearing on behalf of the people of the state of California.
Thank you. My apologies. You're not here on the capacity of the complainant. And may I have appearance for the petitioner?
Yes, good morning, Your Honor. Adam Brown, law offices of Brown and Brown for petitioner Barbara Creedman.
And I know Dr. Creedman is here.
Yes.
All right. I'll begin with the Deputy Attorney General. Do you have an opening statement?
I do. And before getting to that opening statement, if I could introduce and offer jurisdictional documents.
You can. I normally have opening statements first, but however you'd like to proceed.
I can certainly start with an opening if that's what you prefer. Before the board today is petitioner Barbara Creedman's petition for reinstatement of a revoked psychological license. In order for such relief to be warranted, the petitioner must demonstrate by clear and convincing evidence that she is entitled to such relief, in particular that she has been successfully rehabilitated. California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 1395, sets forth 5 criteria for the board to consider in evaluating this petition. Those criteria are the nature and severity of the underlying act, the petitioner's acts after committing the act that led to discipline, the amount of time that has passed since the commission of the acts, the extent to which applicant has complied with any terms of parole, probation, or restitution, and finally, evidence of rehabilitation. The evidence in this case will show that petitioner's license was revoked approximately 25 years ago in 1998, following a contested hearing on the merits. The findings of the board are contained in the decision after non-adoption, which is Exhibit 3 in the People's Exhibits, and sets forth that petitioner's license was revoked after the evidence presented was found to have clearly and convincingly demonstrated that she committed gross negligence and sexual misconduct with a former patient. More specifically, while living in Laguna Beach in the early 1990s, petitioner began a psychotherapist-patient relationship with her neighbor. After much of the neighborhood was destroyed by fire in 1993, petitioner began socializing with her neighbor/patient and her husband. As the social relationship continued to develop, petitioner terminated her professional relationship with the patient. A few weeks later, a sexual and romantic relationship began between the petitioner and her former patient. The relationship included numerous sexual encounters and ended approximately 3 weeks later. Since petitioner's psychologist license was revoked, the evidence will show that she has continued to provide therapy as a licensed clinical social worker. That license was also disciplined in connection with the sexual misconduct just described, but that license was placed on probation for 5 years, allowing her to continue to practice. Since the revocation of her psychologist license, she has been exclusively self-employed and engaged in solo private practice, as she was at the time of the acts giving rise to the discipline. Currently, petitioner is semi-retired and works 1.5 days a week, seeing private clients via telemedicine. At the conclusion of this case, and in the interest of justice, on behalf of the people of the state of California, the Attorney General will request that the instant petition be denied due to insufficient evidence of rehabilitation. Thank you.
I do briefly, Your Honor. Thank you. It will be, as I said, brief. Your Honor, and board members, we appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today, first of all. Your Honor, in my over 20 years of handling such cases for all healthcare boards, I have encountered many petitioners for reinstatement of license. Dr. Friedman, seated to my right here, is probably the most heartfelt, sincere, and remorseful client I have ever represented, and I don't say that lightly. That is from the heart. She absolutely understands the gravity and seriousness of what occurred back in 1993, which, by the way, is approaching 30 years now. She takes full responsibility for her actions. She makes no excuses. She is here today before you and the esteemed members of the board as an open book and is proud of her complete rehabilitation, we would argue. And that is evident in the fact that she is not reoffended. She has no criminal nor disciplinary record of any kind since the incidents giving rise to the accusation filed so long ago. She has enjoyed a very successful career as an LCSW, as the evidence will show. But perhaps the best evidence today and the most moving testimony showing clear remorse and rehabilitation and acceptance of all responsibility will come from Dr. Friedman herself. So with that, I again thank you for your time and consideration of our petition and remind you that Dr. Friedman is in fact an open book and absolutely zero danger to the public should she be reinstated. For these reasons and for the evidence to be forthcoming today, we feel that there is no reason whatsoever that the petition for reinstatement should be granted, and if reasonable terms attendant to that granting are required, those will be considered and accepted by Dr. Friedman as well. And with that, I thank you for your time.
All right. Ms. Walton, are you ready? You have documents you'd like to introduce into evidence, is that correct?
Yes, and I've had a brief discussion with Mr. Brown prior to this petition about going through the exhibits to enter them into evidence. So
All right.
we could take a moment. I think this would be a good time to do that. Your Honor should have an exhibit list. The first exhibit is the certificate of licensure, which I would like to have marked and offer into evidence for jurisdictional purposes. This certificate of licensure shows that psychologist license number 8253 was issued to Barbara Friedman on January 16th, 1984, and revoked on September 24th, 1998.
Any objection to having this document? All
No,
right.
Your Honor.
The certificate of licensure marked 1 for identification is admitted.
The next exhibit is exhibit, for jurisdictional purposes, sorry, is exhibits 4 through 14, which comprise the petition for reinstatement and all of the attachments thereto, and a cover letter from petitioner's counsel.
I'm sorry, you said 4 to 13?
4 to 14.
To 14, thank you. Any objection?
No.
All right, exhibits 4 through 14 are admitted.
And finally, for jurisdictional purposes, Exhibit 20 is the notice of hearing, which I would like to have marked and offer into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
The notice of hearing marked 20 is admitted. And I'd like to note all of those, 1, 4 through 13, I'm sorry, through 14 and 20, you said are for jurisdictional purposes only.
Yes, I mean, I would like to now talk briefly about admitting these documents for all purposes, but just to establish the jurisdiction.
Oh, I see what you're doing. I'm sorry, Ms. Walton, you
No,
have a
it's-
slightly different approach. All right, that's fine. So I won't rule on whether it's for jurisdictional purposes. I need to know what's coming in as evidence, so.
Right, I understand
yeah.
that.
All right.
So for all purposes, I would like to mark and offer Exhibit 2, which is the certified investigative report in this case.
Any objection?
No.
The investigative report marked 2 for identification is admitted.
Exhibit 3 is the certified decision after non-adoption, and the accusation is attached to that certified decision.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
The certified decision marked 3 for identification is admitted.
Then returning to Exhibits 4 through 14, which again is the petition and all the attachments thereto, I'd like to have that marked and offered for all purposes. It's already been marked, pardon, just offered.
You can assume the numbers under the exhibit number column is the identification of the exhibit. I've already heard from counsel for petitioner that there's no objection. I assume that's true. Let me know, Mr. Brown, if you do have any objection to anything, but
No,
these
Your
are
Honor,
your
given-
documents, right? So
Correct. Given the nature of our own submission, it's no objection.
There's no
for any
objection.
purpose.
All right, so 4 through 14 have been admitted and are admitted for all purposes.
Thank you. Exhibit 15 is a request for responses to questions from the board to petitioner, which I would like to offer into evidence for all purposes.
Any objection?
No.
The responses from petitioner to the board's questions at 15 are admitted.
Exhibit 16 is petitioner's responses to those questions,
Oh, sorry.
which I would like to offer into evidence for all purposes.
All right, so 15 are the questions and 16 are the responses. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any objection?
None, Your Honor.
All right. The petitioner's responses marked 16 for identification are admitted.
Exhibit 17 is a request from the Board of Psychology to the Board of Behavioral Sciences for disciplinary documents pertaining to the petitioner. I would like to offer that into evidence.
Any objection?
Is this 17, Your Honor?
Yes.
No objection.
All right. The document marked 17 for identification is admitted.
Exhibit 18 is the certified copy of the Board of Behavioral Sciences disciplinary documents, which I would like to offer into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
And finally, the only document that we haven't addressed on this list thus far is Exhibit 19, which is the investigation report from the underlying case. At this point, I am not seeking to admit it into evidence. It's a document that we're proposing to file under seal. If at the conclusion of the hearing or at some point during it makes sense to enter it into evidence, I would look at it there, but it may only be used for impeachment purposes, so I would hold that for now.
All right, we'll return to 19. And just to clarify for the record, the certified copy of the board's disciplinary documents marked 18 for identification are admitted. All right. Is there anything else, Ms. Walton, that you'd like to present on behalf of the people?
No, not at this
All
time.
right, thank you. All right, Mr. Brown, are you ready to proceed with your case in chief?
I am, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, we are here today without character witnesses, but I would like the board to refer to the petition exhibits themselves. And again, I'm going to make sure I have these correct. Those exhibits begin on exhibit number 4, which is the cover letter from my office, the petition for reinstatement exhibit number 5, and proceeds all the way through Exhibit 14, which has just recently been discussed. In that petition, I believe that the petition pretty much speaks for itself, but my client is here, Your Honor, also to provide the board with some direct testimony regarding what she's been through, her rehabilitative efforts, what she's learned from this incident. And so with your permission, Your Honor, I would like her to be able to briefly address some of these issues. She has a prepared statement that she would like to present. If acceptable, I'd like her to be offered an opportunity to read that to the board.
All right, let me place her under oath.
Certainly.
Dr. Cooperman, would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, under the laws of the state of California, that what you're about to say is true and correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And so, Mr. Brown, you don't want to question her? You want her to read this statement?
I'd like her to read the statement, Your Honor. We discussed this in great detail, and as I said, she's an open book, and I think the best evidence today may be derived from her statement now.
All right.
I
well,
may have some follow-up questions. I'd like to reserve the right to ask those, but this is how we'd like to proceed.
All right. It is somewhat unorthodox to allow a narrative when there is an attorney present.
I understand.
Ms. Walton, do you have any objection to this?
We'll object on the grounds that it is a narrative as opposed to a line of questioning.
Mr. Brown, could you perhaps just lead her through the main point?
Certainly,
So
we can do that.
allow your questions to introduce the main points.
Okay.
And Dr. Friedman, if you need to stop, if you're feeling that you need a break for any reason, let me know. And we'll see how this goes. But I'll allow you to refer to your statement to refresh your recollection. It is generally not permitted to read something into the record. So I'm trying to kind of balance those things. So allow your attorney to lead you through the most salient points. I'm assuming you're familiar with her statement. Sounds like you've
Very familiar, Your
put
Honor.
a lot of work into it. So you can use the questions.
Yes.
But the board really needs to hear from her voice and from her heart. So I'm hesitant to allow just a pure reading.
Understood.
So
Given the stress that she's under today, which is understandable, I felt
Yes.
that this was the most productive way to get the most salient points out. But that's perfectly acceptable. I
All
can
right.
lead her through it.
thank
And I
you
will.
very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay, so, Dr. Friedman, when were you first licensed in California?
I just want to say, I failed you as a clinician. I failed you, I failed the profession, I failed myself, I failed my client, and I failed God. I just want to start with that. I'm sorry, this is very emotional. I was licensed as an LCSW in 1977.
Okay. And when were you first licensed as a psychologist in California?
I guess it was 1984. I thought it was 1982, but 1984.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about your education? For instance, where did you go to undergraduate school?
My BA?
Yes.
Northridge. I majored in philosophy. Then I went to Berry College for my master's in social work. That's in North Miami. And then California Graduate Institute, which is a private analytic program in which I got training under Larry Hedges, who's quite well known, and wonderful training. And then at the time of my master's, after my master's, I worked at Child Protective Services in Santa Ana, knocking on doors, and I had a supervisor who felt that I should be beyond working at CPS, and said I should get my PhD, and that's how I went forward with my degree.
Okay, and prior to the accusation filed against you in the 90s, have you ever had a complaint against your LCSW license since?
I've never had a complaint in 46 years of private practice. I've been practicing 46 years.
And can you tell us where your practice currently is?
I'm in Napomo, Central California.
And about how many hours a week would you say you're providing services to patient clients in practice?
Approximately 10. Semi-retired.
And I believe the evidence was that you work for yourself, is that correct?
I have worked for myself since 1977.
Do you have any employees working for you?
I do not.
Do you enjoy what you're doing presently, Dr. Friedman?
I love what I do. I'm an excellent clinician. I'm devoted to my clients, to the laws and standards of our profession, not just because they are established, but because I believe in them. It's who I am. I'm very process-oriented. I would never intrude into someone's process for personal gain or need.
And you recall the incident that gave rise to the accusation that was filed against you, I'm sure, right, Dr. Friedman?
Correct.
And I'm sure that was very difficult memory for you as you prepared for today, correct?
I've never let go of it. It didn't just happen then. It has been with me every day.
Let me ask you this.
No.
Did you understand the seriousness of boundary issues in the clinician-patient relationship?
Completely.
Do you understand now how serious a matter that is?
I understand the role that you play and that you want to protect the public, and I respect that, regardless of the outcome. I do respect what you're doing.
So let me back up a little bit and ask you briefly to give us in your own words, can you tell us what happened with the client at issue in the latter part of 1992?
You mean 1993?
93, excuse me.
Yeah.
What happened with your client?
I want to give you some background. Boundaries are established with every client. This was a neighbor, and I made it completely clear there is absolutely no contact outside the therapy. No personal contact. I don't even want a hello. There was no contact. The day of the fire was a day off. I went down the street, down another street, to observe the smoke at Emerald Bay. There were a few neighbors there, including my client. You have to ask. There was danger to the community, danger to my home, danger to myself. She never approached me. Why? Because boundaries were established. There was absolutely no boundary violation. The fire happened. It went over the hill into my neighborhood. We were evacuated. The whole area was evacuated for 3 days. During that 3-day period, I had no contact at all with my client. Upon returning, I returned to a neighborhood where 650 homes were destroyed. With all that's going on in the world, this seems so trite, but it wasn't on October 28th, 1993. It was traumatic. It was a disaster zone. You had to be there to understand. So upon returning, I took care of everyone. I had a home. I had smoke damage. It was a neighborhood where no one ever talked to each other prior to the fire. And I reached out to everyone. Food, clothing, dishes, furniture, whatever they needed, because I was more fortunate. I I saw my neighbor, my client. I returned on a Saturday, I believe, on a Saturday, and I was back at my office on Monday. And I stopped therapy that day. I explained, she was in need. You cannot have a dual relationship. The therapy was completely stopped, and I referred her to another client, which she declined.
When you say client, do you mean
I'm a
therapist?
therapist, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you.
And so what happened next?
So a bond developed in the community. It was as if nothing else existed except all of us trying to survive. And at some juncture down the road, with all my values and my character and my integrity of who I am, then through the years, it was the one and only time in my life that I didn't know I was in trouble. I didn't know I was vulnerable. I'd always handled everything, and I was vulnerable. And I responded. I'd never initiated anything. I responded, and I was tormented. The damage was done.
And so, having begun this relationship, how long did this relationship with the patient last?
Not more than a week to 3 weeks. It was immediately started and stopped. It was wrong. I damaged, I harmed client. I harmed my profession. I'm one of those therapists that's a predator. I'm not. I harm my character, and I harm my blessings from God.
And since this very traumatic, obviously very difficult situation occurred, what have you done to try to ensure and perhaps assure the board that such an incident will never occur again? I know you've told me many times you're certain deep in your heart this will never recur, but can you tell us today how you know that's the truth? Why is that the truth?
It's always been the truth. It was just the circumstances. I would never, before the fire, it's what I believe as a clinician. I believe in what we do and process, and I would never contaminate, ever. Ever. A client or a section.
So, after you terminated the relationship, how did you inform, or when you were terminating the relationship, how did you do it? How did you inform your patient that, look, this is wrong, I know I can't? How did you approach that? How did you do it?
It was clear cut. She was in my office on Monday, and I told her. I understood. I've never terminated therapy like that, obviously. There's never been a fire, and I said I can't have a dual relationship. And they were in need. I did not know at the time that they had nothing, but that's beside the point. I terminated the therapy because I was not going to have a dual relationship.
And what was the response to the, let me back up, strike that question. Did you offer the patient alternatives for therapy, referrals?
I did. I offered, cannot tell you the names, but I offered the opportunity to go to another therapist. She absolutely declined.
And that decline, when she declined, was that made abundantly clear to you? Was it ambiguous in any way?
No.
Okay. How did you handle that situation?
That was her choice.
Okay. And so at that point, what did you do next with regard to therapy? Was it terminated?
It was terminated.
Despite the patient's request?
She did not ask to continue the therapy. She knew that I was stopping therapy. It was no discussion. It had to be done.
And since, I'm going to have you turn to an exhibit. I can have you turn to exhibit number 10 in the People's Exhibits. I want to ask you a little bit about continuing education that you may have completed as you prepared for your petition today, okay?
Yes, I'm not sure I can read it. My eyes are very blurred.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a general question.
Thank
Have you completed continuing education that is noted in exhibit number 10 with what are numberings G1 through G6? Did you submit those to me?
Yes.
And have you in fact taken these courses?
Yes.
Okay.
In addition, I've had continuing education requirements as an LCSW my entire career, and every 2 years I have to complete 36 units of continuing education.
Okay, and in one of these exhibits, which is going to be labeled Exhibit G6 or AGO number 67 within Exhibit 10 again, is a certificate of successful completion appears to be the ethics of digital practice, an essential guide to providing quality care, navigating ethical issues, and managing legal risk. Do you recall taking that course?
Yes.
And do you recall what that course covered?
Well, it covered telehealth.
With regard to ethical issues.
And ethical issues.
Do you recall those issues?
They're the standard issues of our field.
And have you taken any coursework or done any outside curriculum of any kind regarding boundary issues between clinician and patient?
Well, boundary issues are always referenced in a continuing education class, so, I mean, it's...
And was that information helpful to you considering what you've been through?
Yes, but I don't know how to say except to be clear. I live by boundaries. I don't have to be taught. It's who I am. It's what I believe. Boundaries are the core. It's the basis of our field. People come to us in need. They can do whatever they want. The client has the right to do that. But the clinician has no right to have any personal or intrusion of any kind.
And Dr. Friedman, I think you may have mentioned in the past that you've contributed to the area of telehealth and that you've drafted or written at least 2 books. Is that correct?
They are here.
Okay, you have them here today?
Why Love Stops, How Love Stays is a workbook on transference, what transference is, how it gets acted out, and how it blurs you, how to identify it, and how to take control over your transference issues. Sorry.
What is the...
Staying connected to your partner has more to do with attachment issues, more of an object relations approach, and how, based on our experiences in the past, how it affects how we attach, if we attach, the ways we attach.
When did you write each of these books, Dr. Friedman?
Around 1995.
And for both books?
Yes.
And what was the purpose? Why did you write them?
For my clients, it's how I approach. I'm very process, and I wrote them because it's how I do therapy, and I wanted to help and extend to not just people in my office, but to the community.
And Dr. Kriegman, perhaps the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues today, I'm certain the board would agree, is if you were placed in a position, if you are reinstated, hopefully, if you're placed in a position similar to that gave rise to the accusation against you, how would you handle things if a patient indicated an interest in you other than a professional one? What would you do differently after all that you've been through and that you've learned, presumably? How would you handle that hypothetical situation today?
Again, with boundaries, it's not even an issue because I see it as a process. If a client does that with me, they're acting something out. Whether it's seducing the parent or, God forbid, they had incestuous, it's their process. They're not doing it to me. They're acting out where they're stuck onto me. There's a difference.
And Dr. Kriegman, in the event you're reinstated, what do you plan to do with a psychology license should you receive it? Have it reinstated, excuse me.
Well, I will continue doing what I do. It makes me whole as a clinician. Again, I've practiced 46 years, and this is shame. It's interesting. You have to learn from your mistakes. If you don't learn, then that's real shame. But no matter how good I am, and I'm a very talented and gifted clinician, you can't take that shame away from me. I failed, and I just have to accept that I did that under the circumstances. Other than that, I would not ever be sitting in front of you. And I'm sorry that I failed my client and the profession.
And so, Dr. Kriegman, having said all of that, it appears your remorse is overwhelmingly sincere. Is that safe to say? Understatement, perhaps?
Yeah.
Objection leading.
Yes, sustained. Dr. Brown, Mr. Brown, can you rephrase that?
Dr. Kriegman, you're sitting here today as a sincere person. Is that correct?
All I have is my integrity.
And you value that highly, don't you?
It's everything to me.
Are there any incidents that the board is unaware of similar to the one giving rise to the accusation?
Zero.
This was a one-time occurrence, wasn't it?
Under traumatic, I'm not excusing, but there were extenuating circumstances, yes.
And just so I'm clear, if such a similar situation arose in the future, God forbid, you would handle it completely differently. Is that correct?
Without question, because I've learned as much as I know about myself. I learned that I had trauma that I couldn't handle, and I didn't recognize it in time. Once it happened, and I stopped the therapy immediately, I went on antidepressants, and I went into therapy immediately because I knew I was in trouble. It's just that I didn't catch it in time.
Let me ask you this question, Dr. Kriegman. When did you first start therapy after the incident in 1993?
Within a month. Well, could be days. I mean, immediately.
Okay. And the reason for that was, what was the reason for you beginning therapy so promptly after?
I was tormented, and I had my own sort of PTSD. I learned about rumination that we all hear people talk about. I never had it, or anxiety. I was ruminating anxiety. My heart was racing. I was traumatized.
So this incident tore you up, is it safe to say?
To today.
And given all of that, do you feel that you're any risk to the public as you sit here today if you're allowed to return to the practice of psychology?
I've never been a risk. I've never been a predator. And I'm certainly not a risk today.
I don't have anything further. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Walton, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. Dr. Creedman, you just spoke about how you started therapy shortly after the incident. How long were you in therapy for?
I don't want to say anything that I don't I don't have a clear memory of that. I don't even have a clear memory of who I went to.
6 months? 2 years, 5 years, any estimate?
A minimum of 6 months. How's that?
And are you currently seeing a therapist now?
I am not.
And the Board of Behavioral Sciences placed your social worker's license on 5 years probation. That's correct, right?
Correct.
And as part of that probation, was psychotherapy required?
Yes.
Do you know if you engaged in therapy beyond the requirements of that probation?
I cannot recall.
You've reviewed the accusation against you in this case, correct?
Currently or back then?
Ever.
Back then, yes. It's too painful. I have not reread them.
In anticipation of this hearing, you didn't reread the
I
accusation?
did not.
Jack Daxton answered.
How about the...
Hold on, Ms. Walton. So I think she's already answered, so I'll permit it, but please, the objection is noted. You don't need to repeat the question.
Thank you.
How about the board's findings in the decision after non-adoption? Did you review that in anticipation for this hearing?
I did not.
Do you agree that the board had grounds to revoke your psychologist's license?
Can I respond with more than just a yes or no? Clearly, my behavior. However, you have to ask, why didn't the judge revoke my license? Why did I have a 5-day hearing, an administrative judge, and he gave me probation? Because she provided a journal into the record, a therapy journal. And it showed impeccable work in her therapy and what she got out of it. It never once she never once suggested or implied any inappropriateness until, and I want to add one more thing, any inappropriateness, and she wrote on the same side of the page in her whole journal. All of a sudden, at the end of the journal, there was an entry, on the other side of the page. And the entry implied stated that I was inappropriate and within the therapy setting. The judge felt because her testimony throughout, she had lied, that I was a credible witness, and he gave me probation. Secondly, because of her accusation, I had to take a lie detector test to ascertain whether I had violated a client within the therapy setting. I passed the test. If I had failed, I would have been immediately incarcerated. I'm sorry.
Is it fair to say that you contend that the trauma of the fire is what led you to violate your boundaries with your former patient? Is that correct?
Yes.
So what support systems do you have in place today to assist you now in stressful life situations?
Before I answer that, can I correct something you said earlier in your presentation, or is this not the time?
Please answer the question before you, Doctor.
Well, I'm happily married to a woman, and we've been together 5+ years, and we live with our kids, a dog and a cat that I've had for 11 years.
Do you have a network of psychology professionals that you regularly interact with?
I am new to the community. I moved there a year ago, and in the first 8 months, we redid the inside, outside, everything. What I do have, so I do not have a network of professionals. What I do have, which is incredible, is a very close, tight-knit community. Everyone is friendly, have a lot of friends there, very social, active, golf, exercise. I take very good care of myself. Hardly drink, never have, no drugs.
At the time that you entered into the relationship with your former patient, were you treating other patients at that time? I don't know
Yes.
if the mic picked that up. Yes. Do you think that your conduct with your former patient impacted those other patients in any way?
I do not, because even today, this is traumatic, doing what I'm doing. I'm still working. I have an ability, and if I felt in any way that I was not able to perform to my standards, I would have taken a break. I would, whatever. I have an ability to put my issues aside, and when I enter my office, outside my office, I can tell you I was a wreck, a mess. Inside my office, totally competent, professional, present, and into my work with them. I'm sorry for the Kleenex.
You had discussed some certificates of continuing education completion with your counsel, which I'd like to briefly talk about. Is it your understanding that as part of your petition paperwork, the board asked if you had taken coursework in the areas pertaining to your offenses?
Yeah, I'm a little, yes.
Okay. And these are the continuing education certificates that you submitted?
Those are a minuscule example of continuing education that I took and that I have provided.
What would you consider areas of continuing education that would pertain to your offense?
Well, certainly law and ethics, boundaries, learning how to be everything we do pertains to my violation. Everything. It doesn't matter what class or continuing education I would take. Wrong is wrong. There's no gray in this. You don't have to learn, you don't have to go to a class. There's no gray. And I've never had gray in my office, ever. You understand what I mean by gray? There's black or white.
So in looking at these 6 certificates, G1, the first, the title of that course is Understanding and Treating Obsessive Compulsive Spectrum Disorders. If we look at G3, that's Understanding Type 2 Diabetes. Is it your contention that these courses pertain to boundary violations?
I did not take just these continuing education classes.
Yeah, I'm going to object, Your Honor. Misstates the testimony. That is not what she said at all. Totally inaccurate recap of what was stated.
Right. I don't know that she represented every one of these particular
Correct.
certificates are about the offense or boundary issues. I think, though, she did say that virtually everything has every continuing education has, in psychology, has a relation to boundaries. So on that basis, if you could rephrase your question, Ms. Walton, I think I know what you're getting to. Perhaps rephrase it a bit.
Can you tell me how this Understanding Type 2 Diabetes course pertained to boundary violation?
May I ask you a question?
No.
No. Okay. I wasn't thinking in those terms. If I misspoke, I am sorry. I was not suggesting that understanding diabetes could pertain to boundaries. However, boundary issues. However, when you do understand diabetes or OCD or anxiety, and people display behaviors that are inappropriate and they bring that into the office, which they can, and they ask more from the therapist or react to the therapist and have an aggressive reaction to the therapist as a result of some medical condition, that still is a boundary issue. Because depending upon how the therapist responds, if a therapist gets hooked, they've lost their boundaries. Always have to be clear on what's theirs, meaning the client, and not get to respond to that. So in that sense, that has to do with boundaries.
Since your license was revoked, have you undergone a psychological evaluation?
I have not.
Since your license was revoked, have you participated in any volunteer work?
Well, I volunteered for 13 years at the free clinic in Laguna Beach, supervising counselors that wanted to be therapists. Because of what I did, I stopped that, and I felt that I didn't deserve to represent the field in training other therapists.
So that work was done prior to the revocation?
And I can't exactly remember how long I did it, but it was definitely prior to the revocation. Volunteer work, in terms of doing therapy, no, I have not. In terms of giving back to the community, I am very involved in food banks. I'm involved in school supplies for children. I'm involved in financially. Up until a year ago, I gave to 19 charities a month, giving back in that way. And I can name almost all of them if you need.
No, thank you.
For years, I did that.
If we turn to Exhibit 14, these are the letters of support that you submitted with your petition. I've reviewed these letters, and none of them are from a licensed psychologist, correct?
Daria Zetlin may be New York. Yeah, LCSW. Okay. No.
Can you tell me about the extent of your current interactions with psychologists on a professional level?
Object, relevance?
Overruled, I'll allow it. You may answer.
I do not have any interactions currently.
Did you show the authors of these letters the decision after non-adoption?
Did I show them? I'm sorry. What are you asking? I'm sorry.
In asking the people who wrote these support letters for you, did you show them a copy of the decision after non-adoption?
With each individual, I broke down and told them everything. Did I have them read something? No, I did not. Did I reveal every aspect of what transpired? Absolutely. I would never ask anyone without being thoroughly transparent. How could I ask them for support if they didn't? It just would be wrong, and I wouldn't do that.
So it's been 25 years since your license was revoked. You've been working with your LCSW license since that time. Why are you petitioning for reinstatement now?
It's a very good question. I have been tormented because of my values, my character, my integrity of what happened, even though I understand. I still dream about it. And my wife is the one that, and I said, oh my God, but my wife is the one, Susan, that said, try to resolve this. Go to the board and tell them, talk to them. And that's what I'm doing. When I was in front of the board before, I was not given an opportunity to answer any questions. So I appreciate your questions now. Whether I agree with everything, I appreciate it. It allows me to verbalize and to share with you. And I wanted to become whole. This is my profession. And
I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. Is there a need for a break?
Just a couple, Your Honor.
Let's take a 5-minute break off the record.
Your Honor, I misspoke. I'm sorry. My client indicates she's fine to proceed.
I
so
am.
perhaps we-
We'll take a 5-minute comfort
Understood.
break. Okay,
No problem.
off the
Thank you.
record. All right, back on the record. Mr. Brown, do you have anything on redirect?
I do, Your Honor, briefly, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Judge Creeman, I'm going to have you turn to the People's Exhibit 14, which was the subject of some recent questioning by the Attorney General, character letters. You have those in front of you?
yes,
Okay. And let me start with Exhibit, which is marked K1. This is a character letter from a Daniel Lopez, M.D. Is that correct?
yes,
And is Dr. Lopez a physician?
yes.
Where is he licensed to practice?
California,
And how long have you known him?
20 years,
Okay. And is it true that Dr. Lopez is a primary care physician?
yes.
And do you know where his practice is?
Not currently. He was in Palm Desert when I was in Palm Desert.
Okay. And in that letter, near the bottom, I will quote, Dr. Lopez states, Barbara recently told me of her past history of improper behavior with the client and her subsequent loss of her psychology license. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is that true that you did in fact tell him of your history with the board and the loss of your license?
Yes, everything.
Okay. Did he have any questions for you once you discussed this with him?
No.
Let me have you turn to Exhibit K2, which is the next character letter in sequence. This is a character letter dated July 19th, 2022, from a Sharon D. Landa. Is that correct?
Yes.
How do you know Miss Landa?
She's a friend of my wife.
Okay. And in the second paragraph of that letter, Miss Landa writes, Barbara and I have talked many times about the revocation of her psychology license and how it has emotionally affected her. Is that true?
Absolutely.
So you've had more than one conversation with Miss Landa about this matter.
Yes.
Okay. And you did in fact inform her that your license was revoked.
Absolutely.
Was there any misunderstanding as to what you were telling her?
There was, with everyone, there was absolutely total clarity of my situation, what I did, when it happened, every circumstance, completely thorough, revealing.
Okay, and turning to K3, character letter from Mr. Leon Seroff, dated June 30th, 2022. Is your testimony the same as previously? He was made aware of your revocation.
Absolutely.
Turning to Exhibit K4, a character letter from Daria Zetlin, LCSW. Is your testimony similar to before, that she was made aware of the entire matter today?
Yes.
Finally, there is a letter from, not finally, the next letter is from an individual, or perhaps it is the last letter. The last letter is from Rodney Soda, S-O-D-A. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Soda, how long have you known him?
He was he's a criminal attorney in Palm Desert, and I would say I knew him for at least 20 years. I can't say to be precise, but.
Okay. And in that second page of Mr. Soda's letter, he writes, in writing this letter of character, I am mindful of the circumstances surrounding Dr. Friedman's license revocation in September of 1998. Is that correct?
Correct.
And does that, in fact, mean that you fully disclosed this matter of your revocation to Mr. Soda?
Yes, with every person, when I shared all of it, I completely broke down out of shame for what I had done. And I shared it with each person and took total responsibility for my behavior. No one else. Regardless of the fire created my trauma and my reaction. But I alone am responsible for my actions.
Dr. Friedman, as you sit here today, I want to make sure we better understand, why do you want to return to the practice of psychology? What brings you here today?
I want to continue to help people under my psychology license. I'm proud, I was proud of being a psychologist. I've never used that term once since my license was revoked, and when someone says, oh, you're a psychologist, I say no. I'm a psychotherapist under my LCSW. They probably don't know the difference, but I know the difference. And I want to continue to treat people under my psychology license, because I've never let go of the field. It's who I am.
It's what you love to do, is that correct?
That's why I'm still working. I don't need to work. I'm gifted. Someone who comes into my office, I have talent. I can see beyond what they say, ask the right questions, understand where they're stuck, understand why they're stuck, understand what keeps them stuck today, and help them go from operating from their child mode as an adult to their adult mode as an adult. That's what I do. You come into my office, you get 100, you'd be proud of my work. I give 100%, and people grow. And that means everything to me, and I'm not through doing it. I still have the love and the desire, as long as my client is willing to do the work, because I'm tough. I don't just sit there. I'm very involved. And if you want to grow, you will grow with me. If you don't, you'll probably leave the therapy.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Do the board members have any questions for Dr. Friedman? Ms. Kasaga? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Dr. Kasuga. I can't quite see your.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, there we go. That's very helpful. Thank you. Dr. Kasuga, please ask your question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, Dr. Friedman. First of all, I just want to let you know that I appreciate you coming in front of the board today, and I know that some of the things that I'll be asking may be difficult to talk about, but I just have a few questions related to some of the testimony that you shared today. First of all, are you considering returning to therapy? Given the torment that you have shared today, and is that something that you're considering?
I have thought about it, yes.
Do you think therapy could be beneficial at this point? Certainly as it relates to your work as a clinician?
I do not believe it's my work as a clinician that I would be returning to therapy. It's forgiving myself. I've talked to God for years. I'm very spiritual. And I've tried to understand shame. In a therapeutic way, it certainly helps to understand what I've gone through, because when a client has shame, it's not just an intellectual understanding. I know what they're talking about. When they talk about rumination, I know what they're talking about. I have talked to a friend of mine who's also a therapist, sort of talk back and forth with one another as friends, but helping one another. And I'm torn, because on the one hand, I'm so grounded. I'm very strong. I'm very clear on my role. I'm very clear on the work that I do, and boundary setting, and clients can bring in anything. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. I don't look to them for anything. That's always been the case. But making a mistake like this, such gross negligence, egregious behavior, is difficult for someone like me to live with, because I have such high standards. So we talk about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I was kind of like thinking about that myself in terms of like your responses about like the amount of therapy that you've done since this incident happened 20 years ago. It seems like the only therapy that you've engaged in was after the incident for about 6 months, and then during the time that you were on probation for BBS. But aside from that, you have never sought therapy yourself. So I'm just trying to reconcile, trying to form my question. So I'm just trying to, if you can help me reconcile your testimony about having the highest respect for the profession, and and not really, feeling the need to do therapy throughout that time.
I understand you feeling that there was a contradiction, but I'm very functional, and I'm sharing my core with you. But it doesn't control me. That's all I can say. And I don't bring it to the office. Definitely. I don't bring any personal dynamic into my office.
Thank you for your answer. I have some questions with regards the incident. Is that okay to ask about? About the incident. Just about like just clarifying questions.
Is there an objection?
Oh, I guess relevance, Your Honor. I haven't heard the question, so it's a little tough to object to it.
Agreed.
I think we've covered quite a bit of it. Respectfully, that would be my concern.
So we're not here to relitigate that underlying matter. If you have questions in relation to, about the offense in relation to rehabilitation, I'll allow that.
Okay.
Let's not go too far into the weeds, though, on that.
Yeah.
On the issue about the underlying offense.
Okay. So the only thing that, I guess my question is, and then you can say if it's.
Yeah, I'm going to get an objection.
Okay.
If it's
Okay, so there seems to be inconsistency from, it seems like there were, so you testified that you had strict boundaries while you were seeing the patient, and then the fire happened, and then the sexual relations happened. But it seems like from the accusation that there seems to be a prior incidents of boundary violation related to the friendship that was established while the client was the patient was still
Excuse me,
your
Your Honor,
client.
it's the same objection. I believe this was the admonition just given, unless I'm misunderstanding your ruling.
Well, there have been questions about whether there was any other violation beyond the offense.
I thought the
and
testimony established there were.
I think that's what she's asking. Was the
Okay.
friendship a separate boundary
Understood.
violation? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I'll allow that question.
Okay.
I frankly would love to answer that because I'm not clear on the question. There was no, if you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, that there was a friendship while she was a client, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Absolutely not. No, it did not happen.
Okay.
It did not exist.
So the only thing that you're saying is about the sexual relations that happened after the fire that led to the discipline and the revocation.
Correct.
Thank you for.
Do you have many questions? I'd just like to give every board member an opportunity.
I just wanted to clarify about the friendship violation or alleged violation, and then so in terms of rehabilitation, I'll just go there so it's safer grounds. My question is, do you have a plan for when you find yourself in a vulnerable situation to reassure the board that you can continue to practice safely? Aside from your testimony that, this will never happen, like what other safeguards can you share with the board? Like, do you have a plan?
In my office, one of the things that you hear and evaluate when you're treating a client, it's not what they say, it's what they do, it's their action, right? That's how we know, not their interpretation, but what does their behavior exhibit? I have 46 years of this never occurring. That's all I can give to you. It's never happened in 46 years other than because of the fire, and it would never happen again. And unfortunately, I don't have another 46 years. Wish I did, but that's not going to be. But I've my behavior to tell the board. It's all I can show you, my patterns. That's the best way to evaluate me. Not what I say. Look at my actions.
The reason why I was asking is because you contended that you were strict with your boundaries, and then this trauma happened, and then all of a sudden you committed, you weren't able to practice safely. So my question is more about like, do you have a plan to do to kind of like address the next time you feel vulnerable? Are you planning to seek consultation so you're able to practice safely? And because sometimes it's hard to see, like when we're vulnerable.
I understand your question now. I'm so sorry, I did not understand if that's what you were asking. It's a very good question. And if I was on the board, which I would love to be on the board, I would be asking the very same question. What I learned from the event is that I was vulnerable and I did not take heed. I did not monitor myself well enough because I had never been, let's say, out of control. I had never been traumatized. And I was wrong. So I learned from that if I should ever be traumatized again, I would it would not be a surprise, I can tell you that. And I would absolutely immediately seek therapy. But when we make mistakes, you either learn from them or you repeat them. I would never repeat, and I've learned from my mistakes and my negligence in understanding my vulnerability back then. I was so wrong for not giving it weight. I knew I was off, but I really didn't know how off I was.
Thank you for your answers.
Mr. Fu, do you have any questions for Dr. Friedman?
I do, thank you. Good morning, Dr. Friedman, and thank you for your time today and for being here. My first question is, do you take responsibility for the misconduct?
I hope I've conveyed today that I'm 100, no one else, 100% responsible for my misconduct. Regardless of my client, she's a client. She could do whatever she wanted. The fire was the trigger, but no one but me is responsible for my misconduct. And that's what I live with.
And what was the misconduct?
That with an ex-client, but she's still a client because I truly believe I never have contact with clients once they stop therapy. because I always want my door open to come back. And in fact, now that's what happens, is people that I've treated in the past, they come back years later. The misconduct is I close that door.
And I'm not asking for a textbook definition, if you will, but what's the definition of dual relationship?
Of a dual relationship?
Or multiple relationship?
Anything outside the therapy office is a dual relationship. If I had a need for a client, well, it's not really a dual relationship, totally inappropriate. Anything outside the office, I'll leave it at that.
And is a neighbor a dual relationship?
I had zero contact with her as a neighbor. I know it sounds, I didn't even know her. It was that type of neighborhood. There was a mountain on the other side of the street. There was there were like 3 homes and then my home. There was no contact. I didn't even know when she moved in.
And a final question is, with regard to managing the possibility of dual relationships, if a neighbor approached you now that you had no contact with, would that be considered a dual relationship to you in terms of them soliciting your services, your LCSW services?
First of all, I wouldn't do it. Let me be clear. Absolutely, I'm not going to see a neighbor. And if they were in my neighborhood, and especially I walk the streets a lot, right? Exercise or golf or ride a bike, I don't want to see a client. I would not treat anyone who's a neighbor in my community.
Thank you for your answers today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions.
Mr. Phillips?
Hi, Ms. Friedman. I just have a few questions for you. How has the APA's Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards changed since you're...
I didn't hear you either.
One at a time, please. Dr. Phillips, if you would repeat your question.
Sure. How has the APA Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards changed since you were licensed?
I don't think it has changed in that sense. A violation
You
is
don't
a
believe it's changed in the last 28 years?
I didn't hear that's what you were asking. What I thought you were asking.
I'm talking about the overall code.
Oh, the overall code.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's changing. Well, that's continuing education. The overall code has. I'm not sure what you're asking. So before I.
Okay. So we have a Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards.
Right.
That is particular to psychologists.
Right.
How has that code been changed over the last 25, 30 years? Do you know?
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Okay. You talked about extenuating circumstances. Do extenuating circumstances change our ethical obligations?
No.
Okay. When you described to the people that wrote letters of reference for you that we've seen today, did you tell them about the extenuating circumstances?
I did.
Okay.
But may I add?
Sure.
We can't negate the extenuating circumstances because if they didn't exist, that would not have happened. However, may I just finish? I'm 100%. It's my fault. I failed. Extenuating circumstances or not, I failed my client and I failed the profession.
Let me ask you another question. So as part of your rehabilitation, you went to therapy. Is that right?
Yes,
You don't know the name of the therapist,
30 years ago. I'm so sorry.
and you saw her for more than 6 months or more, and you don't remember her name?
I do not, and it was a he. And I do not.
So beyond what you've told us that you went to therapy, we don't have any written proof of the fact that you went to therapy.
I am hoping that this board can see from my testimony that I do not lie. I'm not going to tell you something that's not true. I'm not going to betray my integrity just to get a license. I'm not going to do it.
Did you betray your integrity when you slept with your client?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained. Ask your next question, Dr. Phillips.
Does it constitute a dual relationship to do therapy with a neighbor regardless of boundaries?
I want to be clear. Please say it again so I'm clear on your question.
Does doing therapy with a neighbor regardless of boundaries constitute a dual relationship?
I did not believe so at the time because I never saw them or talked to them. But it clearly was a terrible decision on my part, wasn't it? Because it put me in a situation.
Did you ever see your client in your home?
No, never.
Did you ever see your client and her husband in your home?
When they were a client, when she was a client, never.
After they were a client?
As a neighbor, yes.
Okay. Who was hurt the most by what happened?
My client.
And anyone else?
Me. Her husband. But my client, because she trusted me. And she should have trusted me. And I became vulnerable. And what I could offer, all that therapy that we had, was damaged because of my actions.
In fact, it may have negated the value of that therapy. Is that correct?
I'm so having a problem. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I'm
wear
sorry.
hearing aids. I'm very sorry.
I will make it as loud as possible.
Thank you.
And that could have negated all the value of that
Yes.
therapy.
It could have.
And it could have traumatized her.
Absolutely.
And it could have traumatized her husband.
Correct.
Can you think of a worse ethical obligation or ethical violation than sleeping with your patient? Or a former patient?
No.
Okay. I don't
Please,
have any further questions.
please understand, you're not telling me anything that I don't know. I just want you to know, I know you're right. Everything you're saying. And I appreciate you as a board member doing your job. I do. Whether it affects me or not, you're right. And you should ask those questions. I appreciate
Dr.
it.
Tate, do you have any questions?
Hello? Hello. Thank you, Dr. Creedman, for coming before the board. I had a few questions, but other board members have asked, and it's been answered, so thank you. I do have one question, and please let me know if I'm hovering a little bit. I would just like to know who initiated the termination of the therapeutic relationship and who initiated the termination of the sexual relationship?
Me and me.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Hi, Dr. Creedman. Thank you so much for being here today. As Dr. Tate said, many of my questions have already been asked by my colleagues, so I don't have very much to ask. But I am curious if you could talk a little bit about, Dr. Phillips mentioned the harm that has been caused to your patient. As part of your process of rehabilitation, can you talk a little bit about how you have understood the harm that was caused as you have been working through this issue over the years?
My integrity as a therapist and who I stand for, and to betray my character and my ethics, and she came to me, trusting me. It's unspeakable. That's all I can say.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I'm thinking about your testimony, and you mentioned a few times that at the time you didn't recognize that you were in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how you understand that now? What kinds of insights you have around vulnerabilities to making errors in judgment?
No. Terrible error in judgment. Again, I know myself quite well. I know my dynamics. I know the influences of my history, but I did not know about my vulnerability and that I could be traumatized. I've been blessed in that. Of course, we all have issues from our childhood, but I didn't have trauma. So I wasn't prepared for trauma. I had no reference, and so I didn't recognize it within me. But once you experience this, you better learn from it, or else I should not practice, which is what the board did, but I did learn from it, and I have continued to practice. And if on any level I should be traumatized again, I know the signs. I know the signs. I ignored the signs because I didn't know to the extent of how fragile I was. I didn't know. That's all I can say.
Okay. You also mentioned this issue related to boundaries and if clients are sort of acting out their challenges in the therapeutic relationship, that it's transference. Can you speak a little bit about your understanding related to countertransference and how that shows up in the therapy relationship?
Well, there are those that believe that countertransference is an aspect of therapy. I think I would debate that. What I would say is when someone has a situation and I can understand it because I've gone through it, it gives me an ability for empathy and compassion. Do I then put how it affected me or how I would handle that onto them, countertransference? No. Am I not answering your question?
Yes, I'm
sorry.
I'm formulating another question.
Oh, I'm
Give me a
sorry.
second.
Okay.
And this is something that Dr. Kasuga asked, and I'm not entirely clear, so I just want to drill down a little bit. related to safeguards that you have and plans to not engage in these kinds of behaviors. I guess my question is, knowing the triggers, knowing your dynamics, what is the professional support, professional guardrails that you have? Because it's one thing to be aware of one's own internal dynamics. It's another thing to have the supports around you for them to be able to see things that you might not be able to see clearly. So I guess I'm trying to get clear on how well established your professional supports are present day.
It sounds like my responses have not been adequate for all of you on this particular subject, but I can only say what it is. I have a very close relationship with Daria. We went to high school together and elementary school, and grew up on the Beatles together and all that. She's a clinician in New York. She's from California. And we converse all the time. And she's a very good support system for me. And we grow from one another. That's all I can say.
And last question. What does rehabilitation mean to you? What has that journey been like over these last decades as you've been working through this?
Yeah, it's a good question. It speaks to my core. This would never happen again. Unusual circumstances, but regardless, I was traumatized. I'm aware of being traumatized. I'm aware that I would never be vulnerable like that again. When we talk about rehabilitation, look to my character and my integrity. As I said, I'm a very gifted clinician and I'm good in my office. And I would never, ever, ever cross that line. It just wouldn't happen. There are things that we can say that we would never do. Like kill a person, never kill a person. I would never do this again. It's just not a question. It's not even an issue of rehabilitation, even though I understand. I had a moment where I was traumatized. And I knew I was wrong.
Thank you so much.
I'm not sure I answered your question. I hope I did.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Friedman, thank you for being here. I really just have a follow-up question to
Can you
Dr.
just do me a favor and speak so I can hear you? Thank you.
I have a follow-up question to what Dr. Rogers has asked. If you were to encounter a traumatic situation in the future, what resources, Dr. Rogers talked about, what professional resources do you have to support you in those situations? And But what personal resources? How would you respond? What would you do to help yourself?
I would go to everyone that I've got a lot of close friends. I would go to them to say, I would go to my wife. I'm very conscious. I wasn't huge, I got it. Huge error in judgment.
So I'm sorry. Where would you say entering therapy might fit into your process of thinking how to manage or work with that trauma?
If I was traumatized again, I would immediately, without question, go into therapy. Without question.
Okay.
And I did then. Just too late, wasn't it?
What would you say that your thoughts are about becoming involved in the professional community where you're living?
It's not that I haven't wanted to. I felt I would have to tell them. It's who I am. I'm very honest to a fault, maybe. Wasn't ready to do that in my new community. That's the truth of it. It was, but I want to.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Dr. Friedman, thank you for coming and joining us today. So in the case with the Board of Behavioral Science...
I'm so sorry.
Hello?
Thank you.
So in the case with the Board of Behavioral Science, you said the journal proved that she lied. And I was just curious, what had she lied about? Because you said that helped the judge see that you were a credible witness. So I just wanted to know more about that, if that's possible.
It's a good question. Throughout the journal, she talked.
To object on relevance.
Okay. It just, to me, it just felt like that was like, we're hearing a lot about remorse, and it just feels like in that saying she lied to me made it paint like she was a victim as well, because this person lied about something, and so that was the only reason I was asking that question.
Regarding whether the most serious discipline the board could impose, revocation, was necessarily warranted, which asks her, puts her in a very difficult position as whether to put herself in the place of the board. It's not actually relevant to the issue of whether she's rehabilitated and safe to practice, which is the issue before it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So then, you've stated that an incident like this hasn't happened again. But when we say the incident, we mean like the actual relationship. But I'm curious, and I don't know if this can be answered, but if there had been a time where, let me go back a little bit too. So she was married, you were married, so I'm just wondering, in the therapy, because everything happened so immediately after the fire, that there had to be hints of like a crush or I don't know if she talked about her feelings maybe for same-sex partners. So in a way, it just felt like you knew you could cross the boundary, like you had to know that that was an interest of hers. And so my question is, had you ever had a patient after that incident that kind of like expressed these emotions where you knew it could happen again, and then if you did anything to stop it? So
Object vague, proper hypothetical, mistakes of testimony. I mean, there's.
I guess because like, how do you prove rehabilitation unless you're like, well, you know, this similar thing happened and this is what I did to stop it, and we're not hearing anything like that, in my opinion anyway. So.
Ms. Riscata, if you want to ask her whether she's felt other patients developing feelings for her,
Okay.
and if so, what has her response been as a clinician? You can ask the question, I'll get an objection if there's still a problem with it, but we do want to kind of move to the present. What happened, happened.
Okay.
So it's a matter of what's happened since. I think that's the essence of your question. If not,
Yes,
feel
yes,
free.
no, that is
All
the
right.
essence, like.
You may ask if you.
Yeah, so basically kind of like, how would you handle, or how, you know, have you under sexual transference after that incident?
Your Honor, I'm still going to object. Is this in the nature of a hypothetical? If this were to happen, how
Well,
would you? Because I'm confused. Again,
Yeah,
I'm
I guess
sorry.
what
I understand.
I'm trying to
It's
find
two
out
separate
how they
questions,
learned
right?
from the incident. If
Are you asking her whether she's experienced or gleaned sexual transference from other clients?
yes, yes,
Okay, so you can ask her that, and then you can ask her how she's handled, depending on her answer.
Thank you, Your Honor.
yes. I guess I thought I phrased it that way. So, have you ever experienced that again, and how did you handle it? Is that?
If I may,
Or maybe someone else could rephrase it.
Just for expediency. Dr. Kriegman, have you ever gleaned that other clients have sexual feelings for you in the midst of treatment?
Okay. There's so much I'd like to respond to that's so incorrect. This never happened. Nothing was ever discussed in the office, and I had no awareness.
Okay.
Period. Let me be clear on that. If a person had a sexual fantasy or whatever, has it ever been discussed since then? Absolutely not in my office. However, I'm very process-oriented, and if they did, it wouldn't be about me. It would be something that, in my mind and my evaluation, it's something about them, and I'd explore that, and I'd talk about it. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I. Thank you.
All right. I will permit the attorneys, if they have any follow-up questions, based on the board members' questions. If you have any follow-up questions, I will allow that at this time, but briefly. Mr. Brown, I'll start with you since Dr. Kriegman is your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I may just have a moment, please. Dr. Friedman, you mentioned when a board member was asking you about your support structure, which I think is important and relevant to your rehabilitation assessment, you said that your close friend, Doria, is a LCSW as well, is that right?
Correct.
And how often do you speak with her?
Weekly, several times a week.
And if something is bothering you or requires discussion that may be weighing on you, I don't know the right words, I'm not a psychologist, obviously, do you feel comfortable in approaching Doria with those issues?
We do with one another.
And if it were beneficial to you as a potential seeker of therapy in the future, would you have any hesitation with contacting a psychologist, psychiatrist, a mental health professional to bolster your professional support structure, as it were?
I would have no problem doing that.
Okay. No hesitation whatsoever.
At all.
And why is that?
Because I believe in that. If I'm in trouble, after all that I live with and that I've done, then I'm not the person I'm presenting myself to be if I don't seek help, period.
And my last question to you, thank you, Dr. Friedman. My last question to you is, you mentioned some reluctance, as I understood it, to become involved in the professional community, in your quote-unquote new community. Is that what you testified to?
I did.
How would you do you still feel reluctant today to become involved in your professional community?
I've clearly gotten the message from this board to do it, and I will.
Okay. So
I will.
So let me ask you, despite your maybe hesitation to do so, do you believe it would be beneficial to you as a potential relicensed psychologist to do so?
I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Walton?
No questions.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Friedman. You're excused as a witness, obviously. Stay here. Mr. Brown, do you have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor. No
You do
character
not?
witnesses other than what's in the written record.
All right. And so that ends your case in chief?
Yeah, we'll submit, Your Honor.
All right. Are the parties ready to give their closing statements?
Yes.
All right. Since it's Dr. Friedman's petition, I'm going to begin with Mr. Brown.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. And board members, we appreciate, again, your time today. I'll keep this brief. Dr. Friedman is here as an open book, and I believe the testimony has clearly shown that she is sincerely remorseful. She is terribly troubled by her decisions back in 1993, but I want to remind the board that that has been 30 years. So when Dr. Friedman's testimony came forth today that said, please look at me and view me by my acts, not so much my words, I don't think there could be a better example of that than what's the individual sitting next to me here. Her actions and the lack of any repeat offenses, including being asked, is there anything that we are not aware of that did happen that was not reported? The answer was no. That indicates by her acts that she is not a danger to the public. She is rehabilitated. She is willing to seek out help if and when she needs it. She understands what vulnerability is. She accepts that. She was vulnerable, but she is here, and emotionally, much of the time, as everyone can see. This is a very sincere, honest, changed, and competent woman who would make an excellent psychologist. She's been in the field between the two licenses for 46 years with this one incident, and that is very telling. So I would urge the board to please keep in mind the drastic amount of time, the large amount of time that has passed since the incident issue, and with regard to her entire career, without any other incidents. There's no other disciplinary history. There is no criminal history. There's no history with drugs or alcohol. This is someone who gets the message. She's sincerely sorry. She's sincerely remorseful, and she deserves a second chance to prove that to the board. How do we prove that? The mechanism of probation is specifically designed for someone in this position. If the board is unsure or has any question about Dr. Friedman's sincerity or ability to practice safely, probation will absolutely assure the board that she can, and even more importantly, protect the public. So what I'm trying to say, Your Honor, and members of the board, is that you have a changed woman here who is incredibly remorseful, accepts full responsibility, is not blaming anyone else for her acts, and should absolutely be allowed to practice psychology, which is what she clearly wants to do and loves to do, has a passion to do, and will do very effectively and competently. I have no hesitation sitting here today telling you that she will be an asset to your profession. I urge you to please give her the chance to prove that to you on any reasonable terms that may be attended. And with that said, I thank you again, everyone, for your time. attention to this petition. It's extremely important to her. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Walton?
Just a brief closing statement. Thank you. As mentioned in my opening, the burden here is on petitioner to prove to you by clear and convincing evidence that she has been rehabilitated such that she does not present a danger to the people of the state of California and is safe to practice. According to the board's disciplinary guidelines, this is accomplished through evidence of a rehabilitated state of mind and actual conduct. Here, petitioner today has failed to meet that burden. If we return to the criteria set forth in 1395, the underlying acts of this case are egregious. Indeed, sexual misconduct with a patient or a former patient is in all cases an extreme departure from the standard of care and a serious ethical violation of the psychologist-patient relationship. Her acts since, while she has not been disciplined again, not getting in trouble again is not evidence of successful rehabilitation. The people of the state of California need more. Since losing her psychologist license, she has continued in a solo private practice using her social worker's license. If the board turns to a series of questions, you asked 17 questions for petitioner to answer. These are written answers, and they can be found, her responses, in Exhibit 15. And I would urge the fact finders here to review those responses if they haven't already. Petitioner responded that since her license was revoked, nothing changed about her practice. She simply continued, but using her social worker's license. She participated in limited therapy, as the board has heard about today. She is not currently participating in therapy. There is no evidence in terms of rehabilitation that she has participated in recent relevant continuing education beyond any minimum requirement of the Board of Behavioral Sciences. The CLE certificates that she submitted do not address the conduct that gave rise to the discipline, such as sexual misconduct, boundary violations, dual relationships. There is simply insufficient evidence that she has stayed current in the field of psychology in the last 30 years. Practicing as a licensed social worker is not the same as maintaining currency in psychology. There is no evidence here that's been presented of restitution or remorse beyond the shame of losing her license. Again, if the fact finder reads through her petition statements over and over, this is how the revocation impacted petitioner, not her patients, not her other patients, not her patient's husband, not the community at large, but how it affected her. And that is not grounds for reinstatement of a revoked license. Petitioner has not participated in a psychological evaluation recently. That would be helpful to the board, I think, in assessing whether she was rehabilitated such that she was safe to practice, but that wasn't done here as part of that petition practice. In terms of the time that has lapsed, yes, 25 years have passed, which is a long time, but that is a long time to come back into the profession having not practiced. It is also a long time to have the opportunity to demonstrate rehabilitation through therapy, volunteer work, creating a network of peers that could be turned to when stressful events happened, and that wasn't done here. Petitioner testified that in her last community, she didn't even tell the professional community what had happened, and that is what has barred her. And if that's not even showing the base level acceptance that you can't share with your colleagues what happened to you and how to move on to get their support, how can we demonstrate rehabilitation? In terms of what happened in the underlying case, there have been a lot of questions about that. The board's decision after non-adoption is Exhibit 3. It sets forth the facts found by the board. That is what happened before for the purposes of this hearing and her reinstatement. And I would encourage the board to look at those facts and determine whether, based on the testimony that they heard today, it appears that petitioner accepts those facts as true. because that also is the first step of rehabilitation, and I don't believe that has been accomplished here. Petitioner's state of mind is simply not one that shows the genuine remorse, rehabilitation, or mature insight that the board and the people of the state of California are looking for here. She wants her license back to feel whole again. That is entirely about her. That is not a reason to reinstate a license. In sum, there is no compelling reason here today to reinstate her psychology license. She is gainfully employed in the capacity that she wants to be, using her clinical social worker's license. If she is reinstated, she doesn't want to take on more work. It is simply about something for her, and that's not enough. That's not why a license should be reinstated. And given the evidence presented today, the Attorney General, on behalf of the people of the state of California, requests that this petition be denied. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, it's your petition, so you have the last word if you want it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I couldn't disagree more respectfully with counsel's assessment of this case. As I began my opening today, I informed the board and Your Honor that I have seen many, many clients in my career, and none has been this remorseful. This woman is sincere. When I speak with her on the phone, she's in tears about what she did. And in fact, she does care, and she has explained that she cares about helping others. Her whole life has been dedicated to helping others. Of course, this matter has affected her personally. It's her license. So of course she's going to be talking about herself in the first person. It does not mean that there's a lack of concern for her patients, her clients. This woman is dedicated to them just as she has been to her LCSW clients the duration of her career. And it's extremely telling, I would submit, that there has been no other complaint against this fine therapist in her 46-year career. There's no, Dr. Kriebman has submitted the required continuing education that the board has requested. What the petition requires has been submitted. She's also made herself, she's made it clear she's open to continuing with therapy. She has not denied taking accountability in any way for anything she's done. So to argue that there's a lack of remorse just boggles the mind. There is not. So respectfully, board members, Your Honor, I believe that there could be no better example of a non-danger to the public, if that's a word, than Dr. Kriebman. She certainly has demonstrated through her acts, and not even so much her words, but her acts, that she is safe to return to practice. She will do all that is requested of her. If probationary terms are required in conjunction with reinstatement, she is more than willing to abide by them completely, as she did many years ago, successfully completing probation for 5 years. So that's been demonstrated. She takes this matter very seriously, and it is about her patients and clients, not just about her. I want to make that extremely clear. I have had millions of discussions with this fine woman, and that has been made abundantly clear over and over. So with that said, the rehabilitation evidence is abundant. It is not lacking in any way. Dr. Kriebman should certainly be returned to the practice of psychology on any reasonable terms that may be attended to that return. And with that, I thank you all again for your time. But please consider reinstating Dr. Kriebman. She deserves it, and she's willing to prove that your confidence will not be misplaced. Thank you.
Thank you both. The matter is now deemed submitted and the record is closed. The board does not announce its decision. Is that correct? No. So, yeah, so there'll be no announcement of the decision. There's 30 days to prepare the board's decision. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Off the record.
Nope. Hello. Let's take a short break so we can plan going forward. So we'll take a 10-minute break. Thanks.